Thank you, Minister. The issue raised is quite unusual because we had an announcement on Budget Day, and then the following day the Minister for Agriculture told us that it wasn't going to apply to farmland. And we all said, fine, great, not going to apply to farmland. But it turns out that the Minister was mistaken. It did apply to farmland. And when you say that the measure that's there to encourage the transfer of land early in the career of the farmer, that rather than waiting until they get into their 80s or 90s, that they'd move it back, is what was encouraged. Now you've changed that. And you're going to allow them to live to 100 and keep the land. And on the day before they pass on to the Lord, they can transfer the land back, and there will be no stamp duty on it. So the very policy that you set out to achieve, you've now turned on its head, which tells me, and I stand to be corrected, that it wasn't thought through in the first place. And that's the first issue. The big issue here is, and what I've really asked a question about is, while I accept that there's that thing about both young farmers and people who are qualified farmers, but for instance, I spoke to a man yesterday evening, he's milking 65 cows. There's 40 acres of land beside him and he wants to buy it. To buy that land, he will now pay 6% stamp duty on it. He gets up early in the morning, he works very hard, he pays his taxes and he produces the goods. We look at him, and I've listened to the exchanges earlier on, look at what he's doing for society compared to the Apple tax deal, compared to the banks who pay no tax on their profits. You know, it just seems totally unfair. And Minister, I would ask you to address that particular point. Thank you.
This is a tax rate which for most of our recent history stood at 9%. Then it went to 6%. And then it's been at 2% for the last number of years. And I am very much aware that when I make any decision, and I can assure the Deputy that I was fully aware of all of the consequences of the decision that I was making and putting to the Dáil on budget night, that it does cause difficulty and it does cause concern and increased cost for people as well. I understand that. But, Deputy, the broad point is that at 2%, this rate was unsustainably low. And if we cannot use periods like this now to change rates like this, we will end up in a position where we have a tax base that continues to be too narrow. And that's why this decision is made. And it's my understanding in the Sinn Féin budget proposal, you were proposing a change in stamp duty on commercial property. So you were proposing what we did on budget day. You would have been as aware as I am of what the definition of commercial property is. In relation to the point that you put to me there regarding the relief, of course, what you neglected to point out in your point is that we have brought this relief in at 1% now, which now does not contain an age limit, as you're correct to point out. We've brought it in for the next 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, it will then revert to an age limit. So the way in which we are looking to maintain the incentive is to say to those who are involved in transactions like this, that this window will only be in place for 3 years, and at the end of the 3-year period, it will revert back then to an age limit that the Minister of the Day will be able to fix.
Thanks, Minister.
And I did that in recognition of the concerns that had been raised with me in relation to the integrity of the farm, of the family farm, and I believe that a measure like this was justified, and that is why it's included in the finance bill.
Okay.
Yes, Minister, but you still fail to take the gravity of the situation. The average farm income in this country is half the average industrial wage. And that's the issue here. Farmers are struggling to survive, and in many cases, where they are dependent on the farm alone, the only way they can survive is expand. And to expand, they have to buy a piece of land beside them. And, it's recognised. You said the Minister for Agriculture raised this issue with you. He clearly raised the issue that it was not just for the young farmer, it was not just in the case where it was within the family, but also for the person that wanted to expand their holding. And there is all kinds of schemes in place, TAMs and everything else, to assist farmers to do that. And yet we see the government coming back in, on the other hand, and taking it away. So it just simply smacks of an issue that wasn't thought through.
Deputy Doherty.
I also want to echo the points there, and I do believe that agricultural land should be exempt, as we supported the amendment on budget night when the resolutions were through. But, Minister, can I talk about a small tangential issue in relation to this, and how a particular individual, and there may be many of them that are caught in this. This is somebody who purchased a large quantity of land to ensure that their farm was commercially viable. The last transaction went through on budget night, and invoice was generated by revenue for for 6% stamp duty, the individual doesn't have the additional 10,000 11,000 euro to pay the 6%. Now, when the finance bill goes through, because the deal is concluded before the 31st of March, she will be charged, or that family will be charged 2%, but they have to pay it now, and there will be a late penalty if they do not pay it. So I would ask that you would speak to Revenue and ensure that there would be no late penalties for individuals who have purchased and who have a 6% levy until the finance bill goes through. It's really important, and people feel really important that they are not in default of their tax liabilities, and they've only 4 weeks to pay that tax liability. And I think it's really important for somebody who entered into a genuine transaction and who is now caught out and they can't get an additional loan for the 4%.
It's the 3 points that have been put to me there. Again, Deputy Kenny, I am well aware of the gravity of any decision that I make in relation to taxation. I'm crystal clear in relation to it. But I go back to the broad point that I make, that this rate at 2%, which was 1/3 of where it was a number of years ago. And if we do not use periods like this to bring rates like that back up to a more sustainable level, we create the seeds for having a tax system that is unable to cope with difficulty in the future. And that's why I made this change. In relation to the point that Deputy Doherty has put to me, Deputy, if you would be good enough to give me the details of the individual you're referring to, I will look into the matter on your behalf. It is our clear intention that anybody who has signed a contract in relation to a land transaction, that they avail of the 2% rate. And if you have concerns in relation to an individual transaction on that matter, if you would share it with me, I'll have a look into it to make sure that the matter has been dealt with from a policy point of view correctly, and I'm sure the Revenue Commissioner will be aware of it too. And thirdly, in relation to what Deputy McGrath has said to me there, in relation to the farm consolidation piece, there is a capital gains tax exemption in relation to that particular area where transactions take place to consolidate farmlands. I have not looked at that issue to date. The reason I have not looked at that issue to date is the overwhelming amount of contact that I received related to providing clarity regarding the signing of contracts and what stamp duty rate applies at that point, and in relation to the consanguinity issue that I've dealt with now in the finance bill.
Any deputies want to respond within the time of that question? Okay, we move on. We take questions. Number 11, 15, 40 and 73 are being grouped. So Deputy McGrath, you summarise.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cahir. Look, and first of all, just to put it on the record and be absolutely clear in relation to the Fianna Fáil position of a hard border, we do not support it. It is our objective, and it's one we share with government, that there should be no hard border on the island of Ireland, just to be absolutely clear about the party's position. But what I do want to ask you, Minister, is about the work of Revenue. They were before the Finance Committee in May. They gave extensive evidence about the preparatory work or the advanced work that was being done, and in light of recent political developments, I would seek an update on that.
Thank you. Like all government agencies, the Revenue Commissioner are actively engaged in examining a range of scenarios in order to support Ireland's objectives. The work has been undertaken within the whole of government framework led by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The precise custom agreements that will apply after Brexit will depend on the outcome of negotiations between the EU and UK. However, it is clear that political solutions must be found before technical resolutions can be applied. I am informed by the Revenue Commissioner that at this juncture it is not possible to assess what specific arrangements would be required if the UK left the customs union, or what post-Brexit checks would be carried out. The Chairman of the Revenue Commissioner has previously confirmed that Revenue is not looking for sites for customs posts. In respect of the Revenue report referred to, I am advised that this was a draft working document that was published on the Revenue Commissioner's website on the 11th of October of 2017. The paper was a preliminary analysis compiled internally by the Commissioner in 7th September of 2016 to support their scenario examination and the deliberative process following the UK vote in June to exit the EU. However, it is important to note that matters have moved on significantly since then, and in particular since Article 50 was triggered. As such, this document remains in draft form and was not finalised, as it was overtaken by consequent major developments and policy statements, and does not reflect the Revenue's current view on Brexit. Their current view was set out clearly in the Chairman's opening statement to the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Finance, Public Expenditure and Reform on Taoiseach on the 25th of May of this year. The Government priorities in relation to the unique concerns that arise for Ireland are very clear: to maintain the common travel area, to protect the gains of the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement in all its parts, include avoiding a hard Brexit. The Government welcomes that these priorities have been reflected in the EU negotiation position, and further welcomes and supports the Task Force paper and the guiding principles for dialogue on Ireland and Northern Ireland, which was published on the 7th of September. The paper builds on the European Council guidelines and reflects the priority Irish issues identified by the Government, including that, in the view of the unique circumstances on the island of Ireland, flexible and imaginative solutions will be required to avoid a hard border, including any physical border infrastructure. This must be achieved in a way which ensures that Ireland's place within the internal market and customs union is unaffected. The paper also makes clear that it's the UK's responsibility to propose workable solutions in this regard. In this area, it is the Government's view that the UK staying in the customs union and the single market, or as close as possible to that, would be the best possible solution. However, it is important that internal analysis continues in the meantime. Several helpful reports and working papers have been published by the ESRI, Intertrade Ireland and business representative bodies. Most recently, my department and Revenue co-sponsored an ESRI study, Working Paper 573 on Articles Trade and Transport Connections, which was published on Thursday, 12th of October.
Kermaigat, and I will be glad to have confirmation of Fianna Fáil's position. I was listening to BBC Radio on the way up, and I heard one of your representatives arguing for the hardest of border, so you maybe want to send her the memo, but I do believe that she's on her own, or hopefully she's on her own in relation to that issue. Minister, the issues that we're discussing here is the report. And you mentioned that there's a lot of other internal work being done. You mentioned the ESRI, Intertrade Ireland and on business organisations. Are we to believe now that the Revenue Commissioners have stopped all contingency scoping exercises in relation to different potential Brexit scenarios? Is that the scenario that is now happening, that the Revenue are not doing any scoping measures since that draft report, which is quite old now? And can you inform the Dáil, was there any intervention by your predecessor or your department with the Revenue Commissioners to leave the report as is? Because at the time, if you'll remember, it was leaked and we had the Revenue Commissioners before the Finance Committee, and at the time also the Minister, and the Minister denying any knowledge of this type of scope and activity. So was there any instructions given to the Revenue Commissioners, and are you telling us that there's no scoping exercise now being done for the potential of different scenarios under Brexit from a revenue point of view and customs point of view?
Well, if you want to take a question. Yeah.
Thank you. Minister, you say that the onus is on the UK side to come up with workable solutions, but the problem is I don't think they're going to, and nor do I think they really want to, because the UK are happy enough to leave the border open. The issue here is on the EU side, because if the UK leaves the customs union, which looks certain, then there will be an obligation on the EU to protect the integrity of the customs union. And the Revenue will be the national agent of the European Commission, and it is a European Commission competence. So I think you do need to answer the question that if the UK leaves the customs union, which now looks increasingly certain, then what are we looking at in relation to the border arrangements? And there has been some change in the Revenue position in relation to preparatory work. And I think you do need to clarify, are they continuing to do analysis, contingency work, looking at options, scaling up IT infrastructure, and so on, because those are the type of things that they put on the record with us at the Finance Committee back in May, but now there seems to be a change.
Minister.
We are involved in a negotiation at the moment in relation to an issue that will have a profound effect on our island. In relation to Deputy McGrath's statement about the view of the government, the British government, excuse me, in relation to a customs union. What is crucial now is that we gain clarity in relation to what their customs policy is going to be. And the view of the Irish government is very clear, that to have a customs policy that is as close to the current arrangements as is feasible will provide the best framework in which we do not return to a hard border. And this is an overwhelming priority or a key strategic priority of the government in managing this issue. The chairman of the Revenue Commissioner has stated that they're not going to be involved in, they're not involved in any work that will prejudge the outcome of these negotiations, because these negotiations are political and they're ongoing at the moment.
Deputy Doherty, do you want to come back?
So there's no contingency planning going on within the revenue. Is that what we're told? Like, I, for one, coming from Donegal, I came through Clady Bridge there today. I don't want to see customs posting this. We've made it very clear. The House has spoken in relation to special status for the North, something that you haven't put on the table. But I would find it very difficult to think that an agency that may be responsible for ensuring the collection of customs duty is not doing any scoping whatsoever. It baffles me. Not that it should be providing a solution to the British government, but it should be informing our negotiators as to the different scenarios that may be on the table in relation to the negotiation. So can you inform me? I asked you two direct questions. One is that there is no contingency planning. Can you confirm that by the revenues in relation to the application of customs at the border? And the second thing is, was there any intervention, direct or otherwise, by the Minister or the Department or Government in relation to the revenue to cease the type of work that they were doing in relation to the draft report or any other type of work that they intended to do?
Of course, the Revenue Commissioner are inputting into and sharing information with our negotiation team in relation to the different outcomes that could emerge from the negotiations that are underway in relation to Article 50. But what first must be achieved is political agreement. And we're very, very clear that a customs policy that is as close as possible to the current customs union that is in place will minimise any of the difficulties which our island will then need to face. But yes, the Revenue Commissioner are aware of the negotiations that are underway. They're inputting into our team as those negotiations are continuing, and we will be prepared for the outcomes that emerge from the British decision to leave the European Union. But first and foremost, we need to reach political agreement in relation to what the customs policy between Britain and the EU will be and the impact of that on their island. And my department, nor I, did not influence the Revenue Commissioner in any way in relation to their work, and I'm not aware of such influence having been reached upon them.
Deputy Bernard Durkin.
Here, look, this question relates to the need for ongoing monitoring of the economy, with particular reference to the indicators affected by recent developments such as US economic retrenchment, Brexit, the Apple tax referred to already, all of which will have an impact one way or the other on the economic indicators.
So the strong performance of the economy is expected to continue over the short run. As part of Budget 2018, my department is forecasting real gross domestic product growth of 4.3% for this year and 3.5% for next year. The benefit of this growth will be felt in the labour market, with an additional 48,000 jobs projected to be created next year. Recent economic indicators have generally been positive. Real GDP growth grew by 5.8% in the second quarter of this year on an annual basis. This follows annual growth of 5.2% in the first quarter. While headline GDP figures can be exaggerated in an Irish context, other indicators such as employment, unemployment trends and taxation receipts confirm the strong recovery. Employment growth remains strong, with an annual rate of 2.4% recorded in the second quarter of 2017, representing the creation of over 48,000 additional jobs over the year. The increase in employment remains broad-based, with gains recorded in 11 of the 14 sectors reported by the CSO. The continued growth in employment has seen the unemployment rate fall from over 15% in 2012 to 6.1% in September of this year. However, a number of risks are present, including the UK's decision to exit the EU and the possibility of significant tax reform in the US. In addition, the sharp appreciation of the euro-sterling rate is posing significant challenges, particularly for the traditional sectors such as tourism and areas sensitive to cross-border trade. These sources of uncertainty highlight the importance of careful management of the public finances and of competitiveness-orientated policies that improve the resilience of the economy. In summary, I am satisfied that the economic indicators remain stable and that our economic fundamentals are strong, although the level of uncertainty remains elevated. In this regard, it is critical that appropriate policies are implemented, and that is what the Government will continue to do.
Deputy. Next Minister.
Minister, can I further ask the extent to which contingency plans are in place or will be put in place to address the issues likely to emerge arising from the issues which the Minister has already referred to, and the issue of the proposed EU Commission's attitude to the imposition of tax in this jurisdiction on foot of profits there in other jurisdictions, and to what extent has it been possible to identify the specific impact in each case and what measures can be taken to address
Deputy Minister.
Well, the reference that the Deputy made there to the European Commission and their views in relation to taxation, our views are very, very clear on that matter. And I outlined them earlier on in response to Deputy McGrath. I do not foresee any circumstances in which the ability of our state to set our corporation tax rate in the way we are at the moment would be affected by the proposals from the European Commission. More broadly, I think all of this debate just emphasises the need to have an economy that has many sources of growth, as opposed to the single source of growth that we had in the period leading up to the crash, when it was construction supported by our banking sector. And it's a further reason why we have to take all steps that we can to make our national finances as resilient as possible, where we reduce the need for our state to borrow and have our national debt on a path that is beginning to fall.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy.
Yeah, last question. Can I further ask to the Minister whether his department has in mind specific proposals to rebut and react to and put in place measures likely to offset the possible negative impact of discouragement to invest, foreign direct investors to invest in the Irish economy. To what extent his department continues to monitor that likely impact, and what is likely to happen in the event of Brexit, US retrenchment and the Commission's proposals to coincide and impact negatively on a country like this, like Ireland, of our economic size? Well, that's exactly the point.
Minister, please.
Well, we're looking to manage all those risks very, very carefully. It is the reason why we have made and are increasing the amount of resources that are available to our agencies who are involved in promoting Ireland, to make sure that the message that we have to tell about the Irish economy, about its attractiveness, is well understood by all. Our recent record in job creation, the recent record in relation to investment into our country, points to the ability of our agencies and the government to communicate that proposition well abroad, and we will continue to do so and make available all the resources that are needed to do that, Deputy.
You're taking questions 13 and 38 together. Deputy Boyd-Barrett.
Minister, one of the main methods through which cowboy, unscrupulous builders and building contractors deny construction workers proper pay and conditions and rob the taxpayer of, I would argue, tens if not hundreds of millions of euro is through bogus self-employment, a euphemism for tax fraud. Now, what my question wants to ascertain is what are the latest net figures from the RCT1 tax head for construction workers. How many workers are employed in construction under that, and how does the net tax revenue compare to construction workers who are employed direct, through PAYE?
Thank you. I propose to take questions number 13 and number 38 together. I'm informed by Revenue that many outdoor operations are carried out by their joint investigation units, with some operations carried out on a multi-agency basis with other departments or agencies, such as the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection and the Workplace Relations Commission. The role of Revenue's JIU is to detect non-compliance with tax and duty obligations, which includes the non-operation of the PAYE system arising from bogus self-employment. As regards recent work of Revenue's JIUs for the first half of 2017, they carried out 5,450 outdoor visits, of which 1,841 were with other agencies. Their officers visited a total of 656 building sites, of which 231 visits were with other agencies. The results of this activity included the registering of 78 businesses as an employer for PAYE purposes, the registering of 685 individuals as employees, and the registering of 145 persons as self-employed. As regards the construction sector, 38 persons were registered as an employer for PAYE purposes, 227 individuals were registered as employees, and 44 persons were registered as self-employed. In addition, 291 individuals in the construction sector were reclassified from subcontractor to employee. The Deputy will be aware that the PAYE system applies to the wages of employees in all sectors, whereas relevant contract tax, or the RCT, applies to subcontractors in the construction, meat processing and forestry sectors. As to the Deputy's specific question as regards RCT-related figures for 15, 16 and to date in 17, I will give the Deputy a table of figures given to me by my officials from the Revenue Commissioner and make that available to you. The figures today, the figures broadly are for 2015, the tax collected under the RCT system was €200 million. For 2016, these are the tax collected overall. For 2016, it was €255.5 million, and for 2017, up to the end of September, the figure was €230.8 million.
The details of the raids made by Revenue and JIU afterwards. Those are interesting facts. I will tell you that judging from the raid that was prompted, I think, by the question I asked in July on the Dolphins barn site, the refurbishment site, that the raid was a joke. It took place in the canteen. People were invited to come into the canteen rather than actually Revenue and the WRC going around the site and grabbing people and asking them for their details, right? So that was it was a way out of actually getting to the bottom of what was going on that site. And I should also add that some of the people whose details were taken on that day, who would have been identified as being employed on that site on that day, only got notification from Revenue that they started their employment a month later, even though they'd actually been working on that site for several months, right? Which suggests a significant problem. But what's interesting, Minister, is you can't tell if these are gross or net figures. And I will put it to you, this is very important. You see, the gross figure in previous years comes down to a net figure of next to nothing when offsets and repayments are taken into account. So we need to get what is the net figure coming in under RCT after refunds and offsets.
First of all, this was discussed on a previous question by a previous deputy, and I want to thank the Minister for saying that the report on bogus self-employment, which I commissioned as a Minister, and which was a cooperation between the Department of Social Protection, the Department of Finance, and I believe it also included references to the Department of Jobs and Enterprise. And the Minister's comment, for which I'm grateful, was that I think you said, Minister, that the publication of the report is imminent. Now, I have been asking about this now for well over a year, because the report was very specific. There was extensive input to the report from the trade unions, and in particular from the Congress of Trade Unions. And I actually, frankly, don't understand why it shouldn't be released, but I think your comment was that the release is imminent is very welcome, because people are going on sites, Minister, and they don't have a choice. Now, if you're a 25-year-old construction worker, you may well feel that you are that you'll never be injured. But a lot of people who end up with injuries have no social insurance coverage, and that can impact on them for the rest of their lives.
So I will provide a table to Deputy Boyd Barrett that will provide in a fair bit of detail the different figures that you were looking for. I don't accept a distinction between gross and net taxation. I mean, people pay their taxes and the taxes are collected. But the table that I have available to me here does go through the tax that was collected under the RCT system, any tax that was then offset against tax liabilities and so on. And I'll provide that, all that information to you, so the Deputy will have it. In relation to the claim that you made there in relation to a particular operation that was mounted in a site which you refer to, I can't comment on that particular operation because I don't have information in relation to how it was conducted. But what is clear to me from the quantity of visits that were made by the Revenue Commissioner and the outcome of those visits that I referred to you, that I provided to the House a moment ago, that they clearly are having an effect in dealing with this issue. If I look at the number of employees who were registered, if I look at the reclassification that took place in relation to individuals, I mean, this appears to be the very kind of activity that you've been calling on to happen. These are the figures in relation to the number of such on-site visits that have happened and the effect that they have had. And the report that I referred to earlier on with Deputy Burton and other deputies, as I said, I will be receiving a report myself from that working group soon, and then the paper that will emerge from that will be published.
From the government on this matter, and indeed the raid that followed the question where I raised this with you on that particular site. The problem is that it hasn't come with a proper outcome, okay? Because the workers involved received notification from Revenue that they started their employment in August, following the question here raised in July, even though they were on site in July and would have got the workers' details in July, and actually the workers were employed from April or May. So what about what was going on beforehand? And is the subcontractor and the main contractor being held accountable for the fact that there was undoubtedly, in my opinion, tax fraud going on prior to that? Okay, and still the record has not been rectified. And the difference between net and gross is very important. I'll give you an example. In 2009, for example, there was 436 million gross tax paid under RCT, but the offset...
just in relation